The new theme music. Ooh.
It's a new theme song.
Morgan, I heard some really interesting theme music in the background that I've never heard before. I thought that was my job.
It is. One of these days we're actually going to take the normal podcast intro songs that we have and get it onto our live show. But I'm going to guess that's not going to happen until we get like 200 episodes on the podcast or something like that.
Hey, we'll have to see how it goes. You never know.
Indeed. Well, today we've got an amazing guest and an amazing topic, I think, as well, Nick. So thank you. Hello to everybody joining us. Welcome to the B2B Power Hour. If you're here, drop a hi in chat. We'd love to say hi to you. Nick, running enterprise deals and sustaining momentum.
It's such a big topic because I know, like, guys know my past. I burnt out in this game. And all too often we get pushed to treat it like a sprint. Everything is go hard, go fast, do more. But there's so much more to it than just volume. I'm really excited for our guests today to really talk about enterprise sales as an endurance sport. What does it take to have that mindset to do this properly? What does it take to have that commitment to see it through? And many, many things in between. So, Morgan.
Yeah.
Who's our guest today?
Let's welcome both. And the reason that we were a little kitschy on the title, I got to be honest with you. He is an endurance athlete as well as a sales coach. So please welcome Scott Sambucci from Sales Qualia to the B2B Power Hour. Yay.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Hey, Scott.
I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So, I mean, you are an endurance athlete, just to clarify. We're not just.
I've done many endurance events. Yes, mostly I started off doing triathlons back in about 15 years ago. Started off just doing local triathlons and built up to doing 3 Ironman triathlons back in 2010, 11, and 13. Then from there, I ended up attempting what we call an ultra triathlon, which is a multi-day triathlon event. And then from there, I switched into ultra running. I was doing that for a few years as well now. So more recently, last year, though, I've taken a break from the ultra running for a variety of different reasons. But I think I've counted that I've done almost 50 what you would consider endurance events, everything from a local triathlon up to 205-mile trail runs.
205-mile trail runs.
And Nick sends me a text every week and is like, God, my run this morning really just killed me.
Dude, it all counts. Every mile counts. And it's not about competing against each other. It's about making yourself better and forcing yourself out. Because there are many days, like, when I'm out training for a heavy or a big race, I mean, it's work. You don't just show up, of course, to the starting line. And there are many, many days where you just don't feel like getting up. And I remember the last big race I was training for was called the Western States 100, which is considered by a lot of people to be the most prestigious 100-mile ultramarathon in the world. It was the first 100-mile race out there and started 30 plus years ago. It's like literally a once in a lifetime chance to be able to do this race because of a big lottery system. There's about 7,000 people trying to fill 300 spots roughly.
Whoa. So
I got a spot in this race and okay, got to do the work. I want to make the most of it. And I remember when I was training for that race, every Wednesday was a day where I would drive about 30 minutes to where there are some hills nearby. And my goal was to start my timer before 5 a.m. So I'd want to see on my Garmin afterwards that I started the run at like 4:59 or 4:58, which meant getting up at 4 and then getting your stuff together, driving out there, gearing up. And that way I could be home by 7:15 after doing anywhere from, 10, 15 miles. I could get home by 7:30, still make breakfast for my son, get him to school and be a dad and then get into work mode. And there are many, many times during those early mornings on Wednesday, especially like February, March out here, Northern California, that's when it rains. And it's like rainy and cold and 30 degrees. And it's like you're on top of this hill and the wind's whipping. You're like, God, what am I doing out here? And it's like, oh, by the way, I promised myself I was going to do this repeat 5 times. So now I'm like on number 2. And she's like, God, this is awful. I got like 3.5 more of these to go. But that's just the price that you have to be willing to pay if you want to be able to do big races like that. And it's just like running an enterprise sale. If you want to be a successful salesperson, if you're a startup CEO, you want to run a successful, impactful company, you just have to decide from the beginning, like, this is the place I want to go. So you have to set yourself up to be willing to pay that price regardless of the conditions on any given day.
The parallels and looking at, you got management on one side, pushing you to do one thing. You got the customer on the other side that, ghosts you or is running on their own timeline or, makes final hour changes on you. And then, you got your manager and leadership pushing for something else. And you think about the headspace you have to be in. I think it parallels so well with you at your 5 a.m. You're like, I just need to get started. I just need to put
Yeah.
in the work. And if I am consistent to my process, eventually I'll get there.
The biggest thing you just said is getting started. It's the alarm goes off at 3:45 or 4 o'clock, and there's that moment where you get to choose. You're like, you can say, you know what, today I don't feel like doing it. It's cold, it's rainy, I'm tired, I'm sore, whatever. Or for me, it's as soon as I get the covers off and I put my foot on the floor, I'm like, all right, I'm started. That's actually when I start the run, is that moment where you get out of bed and take the covers off. That's the process that goes into, because now that I'm up, and it's like, what am I going to do? Go back to sleep for an hour? And like, no, once I'm up, I'm up. Like, what's the point now? Like, I set the alarm. I mean, even then you go back there, it's like, okay, I set the alarm for 3:45. So that's when the decision is made. And then all the work that goes in the night before, okay, I'm gonna get all my gear together in a bag, all my nutrition, make sure my shoes are out, so I don't have to wake up the house. I can just grab my stuff and go. Like, you're doing all of that stuff as preparation to the action, which then starts with just getting your foot on the floor. And it's the same with enterprise sales. You just decide, okay, tomorrow is the prospecting day. Cool. You put it in the calendar, you block off the time starting at 8 o'clock. That's my 90-minute sprint on LinkedIn, where I'm going to be going through and commenting on posts and connecting with my prospects and maybe posting on my own. And I'm going to do that for 90 minutes. And you just make that decision and you block off the time. And maybe you make a list of prospects the night before. Okay, these are the people in my pipeline. This is the people I'm going to go to first on their LinkedIn profiles. Like, all of that, the preparation and the process is way more important than the actual race. Because even think about sales, right? We all think about that magical close the sale, which is a phrase, by the way, I hate. We can go back to later. It's like that moment we get the contract signed. It's like crossing the finish line in the minds of many salespeople. Okay, we won the deal. We even say that we won the deal. We closed the sale. But how many months or even years went into that one deal over time? So you have to commit to the process and the preparation. Like, that's where the sale is made. That's where there's a guy, now his name's going to escape me. I've got many of his books. It'll come back to me. This idea of going pro is the notion.
Oh, Seth Godin?
No. Well, Seth says this as well. It's a guy who writes historical fiction. Stephen, it'll come back to me. It'll pop into my brain. But this idea that you just commit to going. And so whether it's as a salesperson, there's no excuses around, well, my manager really trained me enough, or, oh, I really don't know how to use LinkedIn very well, or people don't reply to my emails, or, God, cold calling is really hard. It's like, okay, so, like, is the magic knowledge work fairy going to show up at your office and say, oh, I'm so happy that you told me it's hard to do cold calls. I'm so happy you told me that your emails aren't getting responded to. Here's the magic gift on how everything's going to be happening. Like, it's so good that you finally complained about it because we were just waiting to give you this gift of knowledge. It's like, no, take the freaking responsibility. Don't wait for your manager to train you. Don't wait for the prospect to call you back. Don't wait for the next conference to beat badges so that you can get more leads. Don't wait for marketing to publish the next white paper. Like, freaking own it and go do it. And you need to love that process, because if you don't love the process, you're never going to win the deal. Amen. Stephen Pressfield is the person who was it. I don't have my glasses on. Is that safe?
Safe. Yeah.
Safe just said that. Yeah. Stephen Pressfield. Thank you. He talks about going pro. He has several good books about being, he calls it, this process of being like, he writes a lot of historical fiction, but then he also writes books about being an author and being an artist. So
The
yeah,
war
you
of
got to just
art.
own it.
Yeah.
Like, don't complain and wait. You're never going to have a perfect manager. You're never going to have a perfect product. You're never going to have a perfect market. You're never going to have perfect pricing. You're never going to have perfect marketing. Like, you have to decide, are you going to go make this happen or not?
Well, I think any athlete has milestones, and I heard a really good press conference. There was a gentleman that had deadlifted like 1,200 pounds,
Oh
and
my
one of
God.
the it was crazy. And the guy walks up to him. He's like, "What was it like to do that?" And he was like, "It was easy." He's like, "Easy." He's like, "You should have seen the shit that I went through to get there, though."
Exactly.
And
Hmm.
that I think
Hmm.
that's what gets missed a lot in the glory moments, whether it's sales or any athletic feat, is we forget the practice, not the perfect practice, but the consistent practice that leads to that perfection, to that pattern recognition, to that excellence. Is you got to put in the work. And like, even going back to what you were talking about, like not wanting to get out of the bed in the morning, like, well, I think about routines, and it's like, I have a bad sleep one day. How does that affect my ability to sell? Anybody that says it doesn't is full of it. It does make a difference. If I don't eat well the day before, it makes a difference. If I don't train and take care of myself mentally, it makes a difference. So as much as people say that mindset doesn't matter in sales, maybe they just haven't seen what a good mindset can do for them, because it does make a huge difference. Like, how you mentally, we've seen it with prospecting, like how you think about prospecting greatly changes the effect and impact of doing it. And I'm like, one thing, like your lessons from the trail, that was one of the things that really connected with me, is some of your stories at the different stations and that headspace. And one of the things that really stuck with me is that one lady that had mentally made up her mind, and then the other one that
Oh,
didn't. I don't know if you want to jump into that story
yeah, yeah,
next, but
yeah. I'm happy to
it
tell that
was
story for
so
sure.
good.
Yeah, so there's something, I mean, a long time ago when I was first getting in ultra running, you sort of like learning how to adjust from going from, say, triathlons to ultra running. It's a totally it's similar in that it's endurance, but it's a different type of challenge and race. You go through different stuff. Like triathlons, I joke with somebody who did like 10 Ironmans, and he said, "Oh, I saw you've done some Ironmans." And I said, "Yeah, now I do ultra running." I said, "Ironmans are nice if you like to be home by dinner." Just sort of like prodding at him a little bit, because the ultra marathons, they go 24 hours or more, or the 200-mile races I've
Wow.
done take 3 days, right? So I was sort of like poking at him. So it's like a different kind of thing. And so one of the things I read is, they talked about the mindset piece of ultra running. And basically, like, as an athlete, you decide at the beginning of the race or even months before the race that no matter what happens, you will not quit. Like, they're going to have to take you off the trail because you're like in a splint, you missed a cutoff time, something else has happened. Like, they're going to have to drag me off this trail. Otherwise, I am going to finish this race. And that goes in from the beginning. And so it's the same with the mindset you were talking about around prospecting and not having a good day. Like, if you wake up, like I wake up, I'm a business owner, I wake up, sometimes I have insomnia. It's like 2:30 in the morning. Okay, what am I going to do? We're going to lay and stare at the ceiling and let the rest of the day be crap. What I do is I do the opposite, which is then I go to the garage and I work out. So I go to the garage at like 3 in the morning and I'll do deadlifts or I'll do burpees and push-ups and whatever. And I'll do a 1 hour workout, come in, take a shower. Now it's like 4 a.m. and I'm wide awake. And now my mindset is switched. And I set myself up to say, okay, well, later on, I'm going to be tired. By 11 o'clock, I'm going to be spent. Cool. I'm going to take a nap and reset. But I can't let the external factor of me being awake with insomnia affect how the rest of the day is going to go. And so from a racing standpoint, I was this summer, late summer, I was up in Tahoe. A friend of mine was running an aid station at a race called the Tahoe. It's called the TRT 100. So it's a 100-mile trail run mostly on the Tahoe Rim Trail. So it's, lots of up and downs. Probably, I think it's about 20,000 feet of climbing and descent over the course of 100 miles. And it's steep stuff. So it's a tough race. It's a really hard race. I mean, they're all hard, but this one's particularly tough. And so the aid station my friend Kelly was running, it was the way that the course was set up. It was both, I think it was around mile 45. So the runners were coming around mile 45, and then you go out to this huge, like 30-mile loop, and then they'd come back to the same aid station. And it was like mile 78, something like that. And I got there for the night shift. So I arrived around 6, 7 o'clock. And some of the runners were just coming in and just leaving the first loop, the 45-mile loop. And I remember sitting there, and there was a guy that was just kind of like sitting, and he looked physically fine, like he wasn't hurt or injured, but I could tell he was out of it. And I just sat down. I was like, what's going on, man? He's like, I just don't know if I want to go. It's like, what's holding you back? And he said, I don't know if I want to be here right now. You know, he's like, physically, I feel fine. I don't feel like, I just don't know if I want to go. And I said, look, man, like the next aid station is 8 miles away. Like you've got this 2-3 mile climb ahead of you, and then the rest is downhill. Like, don't think about getting to the next end of the race. Just like get to the next checkpoint, man. Just get, and then make a decision. Then make a decision, right? Because a lot of times you might feel bad in one stage, and then all of a sudden you move again and you start feeling better. And the cutoff time started coming. I'm like, dude, you're gonna have to go. If you're gonna go, you're gonna have to go now. And he sat there for like another 30 minutes. He's like, I'm done. He just decided he was done. Now, on the other hand, later at this point, it's like go through the whole night. It's like I remember it's like 4:00 in the morning, and there's another cutoff time. The cutoff times work is that you have to leave the aid station by a certain time, and it's a hard cutoff. In our aid station, I think it was 5 a.m. I can't remember exactly, but it was like as long as you take one step out of the aid station, you're out and you can keep going. But if you don't, as aids, like if we're running the aid station, you're not allowed to let the runner go on for safety reasons and all kinds of other reasons. And Kelly, who was running the aid station, was taking a nap, so I took over the aid station as the captain. And there was like 3 or 4 runners that came in 7 to 8 mile mark. It was like maybe 10 minutes before the 5 o'clock cutoff. And a couple of the people just were like, I'm done. Like, there's no way I can make it another, 22 miles, whatever. But there was this one woman, and she had never done a 100-mile race before. And she had her crew around her, and she just looked like spent. And then she looked at me. She said, well, how much more is there in the race? Is it like 20 miles or so? And we were at mile 78. And the race, even though it's called a 100-mile race, is actually like 104 miles because of the course. And I said, well, you have like 20-ish. And she's like, what ish? Yeah, it's kind of like 25. And she looked at me and I said, well, the actual course is a little more than 100. And it was like flames coming out of her eyes. Like, I can't believe you just said that to me. Like, I'm already feeling horrible, right? So I pulled one of her crew over and I said, look, man, you guys have like 5 minutes. She's got to go. If she's going to go, she's got to go now because the time's wasting. And so at that point, now I'm calling out every minute, 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes. And she got up and she looked at her crew with like a minute to go before the cutoff. She's like, let's go. And she walked slowly but as deliberately as she could. She got out of the aid station and up the hill she went, out of view. And I found out later she finished the damn race. And
wow.
I could tell she had decided nothing was going to stop me at this point. And all the things were going bad. She didn't feel well. The race wasn't 20 more miles. It was 25 more miles. It was a big climb ahead. She didn't like the news that I gave her, but she's like, I could tell. She's like, I am going to finish this race. And she did. And that's the difference, whether it's an enterprise sale or starting a company or whatever endeavor it is, you have to decide that no matter what happens, there's so many things you can try to plan for and train for and do all those things. But most of the obstacles that are going to come at you are things that you cannot predict. So from a mindset standpoint, you have to decide, no matter what happens, I'm going to figure a way around this obstacle, over it, through it, whatever it takes to keep going until physically, like, somebody is going to have to drag me out of this office or unplug my phone or take away my email. I'm going to continue to work this deal. I'm going to continue to build this company. And that's just really the necessary component to it.
And it's funny, even in this story, like, I think about the sellers we talk to, and I'm sure you hear this as well with your clients, Scott, in which navigating an enterprise deal, certainly you're not physically running a 100-mile race, but the same sorts of unpredictable obstacles. Oh, I thought I had this champion. Turns out they're not. We thought we had procurement on board. Nope, just kidding. That's not it. Here we go. 3 more months with legal, or any of these other surprises of navigating a complex deal at a really high dollar figure. I love what you're articulating, which is that ultimately those obstacles are expected, and you never know exactly which one you're going to get. So it's
Yeah.
important for us to sort of respond intentionally instead of like react in the moment of like, oh God, the world's falling apart. It's like, okay, what's the process? Let's keep on running. We're at mile 78. We got to get to mile 84. Let's just keep this deal moving. And
Yeah.
I mean, I love this analogy overall, but there really are such concrete lessons for sellers in this, since so much of this at least sounds today about like mindset and preparation and the ways that you're actually approaching your day to day in a complex deal is in many ways the same ways you're approaching a 100-mile race.
Well, and with our clients, because we coach, we don't coach salespeople, we coach startup founders that are in the B2B enterprise space. So many of those founders are engineers or product people by trade, and they're typically good at getting their first customers and revenue through grit and grind and network and hustle and all those things. But when it comes to building that repeatable sales process, that word you used, Morgan, sales process, that's where we come in. We help them build that repeatability. And so whenever we're coaching our clients, take, for example, they have that one deal, like I got this deal in the pipeline and I think it's really close and I really want to get it over the line. Like our job as coaches, we say, okay, look, we're going to do everything we can to try to help you convert this deal. But as coaches, and whether it's a salesperson or a founder, we also have to sort of like take it up a level and say, look, we're not going to win every deal. Sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. And so as coaches, we actually call it the sales quality, sales hierarchy of needs. So if you think about the Maslow hierarchy of needs, at the very top, and every person listening can think about this, at the very top, there's like ultimate outcome that you want to get to. It's that goal. It could be your quota. It could be certain revenue levels, certain types of customers you want to sell to. That's the top of the mountain. Below that is then saying, okay, if that's the outcome I want to get to, I need to have a strategy that's going to help me get those customers. So I need a way of generating leads. I need a way of running presentations and pipeline the right way and pricing and all that stuff. So you have outcome on the top. That's the pinnacle. Below that is your strategy. So, okay, now I know what the strategy is. Below that are my systems. What systems do I need to build and implement to get those leads, as an example? So LinkedIn, like, okay, I need to learn how to use LinkedIn as a selling system, as a lead generation system. And that's why you should call Nick and Morgan, by the way. To say, look, I don't know how to use LinkedIn. I'm kind of using it. It's kind of working. It's kind of not. Okay, cool. That means I need to learn how to build and implement that system. So that becomes repeatable. You go, okay, cool. So we get outcome, strategy, system. Now below the system is like, okay, I know I should be implementing LinkedIn as a way to lead gen, but there might be some skills I need to learn in order to do LinkedIn effectively. Maybe there's some skills in terms of how I communicate with people in direct messages versus email. Some skills on how I find my leads that I'm targeting. How do I use Sales Navigator the right way? How do I take a conversation from LinkedIn and transfer it over to a phone call the right way? These are all selling skills, which is the next layer down. Below that are then situations, which is like, okay, I have this lead that responded to this message. What do I do? Right. And so when that's that situation where like I got this deal, it's close to the finish line, I think I'm going to be able to convert it. One of the things we have to remember is whether we get that deal or not, however painful it may be not to get that deal, we have a responsibility to ourselves and our companies to go up a level and say, okay, if I don't get this deal, what are the skills I need to learn in order to prevent this situation of deal loss happening again, or for a deal stalling out, or forgetting to talk about pricing early in the conversation so that now I show them the price of 100K, they freak out because they thought it was 10K a year. Those are skills I need to learn. And if I have those skills, then I should be able to implement the systems which will help me execute on my strategy, will help me get my outcome. And so we think of that pyramid, those 5 levels, just like Maslow's hierarchy of needs of survival. At the situation, it feels like survival. It's like oxygen. I need this deal to breathe and live and continue on. But that's the lowest level. If you're only living in those situations day to day, it's really hard for you to grow from a selling standpoint, from being a pro. And so you got to look analytically and say, okay, what are the skills that we're missing, or what are the systems I haven't built? Do all of this point into the strategy that I said is important for me to execute on that outcome? That's the whole.
Yeah, because what's coming to mind, and I'm sure you see this a lot, Scott, is like, and I don't think this is a bad thing, but most sales training focuses on just the situations and skill level, which is
Yes.
here, let's talk in this way, let's do discovery in this way, here's the skill we need to build, here's the, it's just skills, just situations, and that's not bad, obviously, right? We need to train those things, but what you're pointing to is this, I love that middle tier of like systems that
Yes.
translate and support into your strategy and outcomes, because I find, especially with more complex sales, like that to me is where I feel the magic happens in some ways, because it's like, okay, yeah, I maybe need to, improve on this skill in this situation, or I need to improve generally in this area, but I have a ordering principle for how I'm actually executing my day to day. And I feel like
Yeah,
that's missing in a lot of sales organizations, or for individual sellers when they're trying to do complex enterprise, because a lot of the training is just like, oh, you'll end up in this situation with a mobilizer, or
yeah,
oh, let's talk objection handling today, and it's only that
totally.
situational level. That's
Yeah,
so
and
good.
right now, I mean, because in general, obviously enterprise sales is complex, but if we look at the world and how much has changed in the last couple of years and even the last couple of months, you can't prepare. It's not like, if you watch like an NFL football game where they have these like cards and they have all these plays. Okay, if it's 4th and 2 from the 40-yard line and it's 8 minutes left in the game and we're down by 3, this is what we're going to do. They can actually kind of build that out, but even that level of preparation, they're going to have there's going to be a certain situations are going to pop up. The coach is going to look at each other like, shit, like we never come across this one before. Because what if in that one situation you happen to have a backup quarterback because your main quarterback got injured, right? You're like, oh, we didn't really think about that. And whether it's in sports or take like I like referring to Beyonce as well, because as she's like the top of the game when it comes to performance
Mm,
and singing, right? She has a voice coach. And the reason she has a voice coach is she always wants to get better, right? And so the same thing, like she can have this concert and she can have this performance and she can be like have every detail planned out. But once she's on stage, there may be something that happens that you can't plan for. And so the reason that she can adapt to that and make a totally weird situation look normal is because now she has the intuition. She's able to adapt the learning and the skills and the systems to each situation, as opposed to like, oh no, this fan just threw something on stage. What do I do? I wasn't expecting that.
right. Man. Nick.
That's amazing. And I hope everybody's got to go back and rewind and just listen to what Scott just said. There were so many bits of gold in there. But I think, and
Well,
Scott, I
I
think,
mean, that's a challenging part about coaching, right? I mean, because coaching, sometimes people like, oh, I need coaching, but what they really need is training, or I need coaching. What they
Mm,
really need is strategy development. So
mm,
coaching becomes this sort of like word with a little c. It's like a hashtag coaching gets applied to everything, and it's not necessarily, that's not how we look at coaching. Like our job as coaches is to help a team of people, yes, build those systems, learn those skills, so that regardless of the situation, they know how to adapt it. So that's where those, a lot of times we get clients are like, man, I got all of these situations. What do I do here and what do I do there? And we'll say, okay, like before we talk about that email that you should reply to, or talk about this presentation you got on Thursday with the chief risk officer and the chief security officer, like let's take this up a level. Okay. So tell me why you're feeling lost about how to prepare for this presentation in the first place. And we start talking about this deal and you realize like, oh, so the reason you need help with the presentation is it turns out you really don't have that much information about the prospect in the first place, which means we just should have done more customer discovery in the first place. It sounds like in the demo that you presented, you did like a kind of what we call my friend Peter Cohen calls it the harbor tour demo. It's like you just show everything, you give them a harbor tour of the whole product, and you kind of hope that they see something they like. And so you haven't really pointed the product specifically to their problem. So we're like, yeah, the reason you need help with this presentation is because actually there's some missing skills and systems that are 2 and 3 and 4 steps before you even get to this presentation. So yeah, in this situation, we're going to try to help you win. And sometimes that means you're just going to have to like take a few steps back. Let's just make sure we use this as a learning opportunity to say, okay, for the next deal, let's identify these skills like customer discovery or running your demos and turn those into systems so that we can avoid this situation in the future. Because that's what you really need if you're company building or if you're a sales rep in a new territory running a new product, or there's a new product release, you got to like figure out what those skills and systems are so that you can adapt to each individual situation.
And it's the hardest thing to build because everybody tries to teach sales like it's principles based, like math and science. The issue is it's pattern recognition. And
Yeah.
this is the I failed miserably trying to learn sales. I was reading books, I was listening to podcasts. Me and Morgan, that's how we originally met, was trying to go
Yep.
and upgrade our skills. And it wasn't until after I realized that sales was a tacit knowledge, meaning that it depends. It really does, because it's all circumstantial, right? It
It always
really
depends. That's always my first answer. Client asks a question,
Yep.
or one of our other coaches, like we've got 4 other coaches that work here with our clients, and they ask a question, and almost inevitably the first answer is like, well, it depends. Let's dig into this situation. And they're like, Megan, you always say it depends, or Steven, you always say it depends, or Scott, you always say it
that
depends.
sounds like a Megan
And it
thing.
does. I have a jiu-jitsu coach. I've been training since I took a break from ultra running. I've been doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu for the last year plus. And, we'll be working on a very specific situation, right? It's like, okay, your opponent is sitting on the ground with their hands up and their knees like this. This is how you pass around them. And we're going to drill that. And so we drill that a little bit. And then I'll ask a question like, okay, well, what if instead your opponent has their knees in the other direction, or the opponent's on their back instead of sitting up? Like, what do you do then? And he looks at me and goes, it depends. Like, your opponent big or are they small and slow? Are they a blue belt versus you as a white belt? Where have you been in this situation before? It's like, it depends. It's infinite tree of situations that I was comparing it with him as like jiu-jitsu is like a chess match. There's theoretically never been 2 chess matches that have been exactly identical in the history of the world. And so jiu-jitsu is like the same thing. You're like, it's never the same, because as soon as I do this and you react this way, we're in this whole different tree, right? And
But
it's the
it's
same, whether it's in sales or ultra running. I remember my biggest learning was a failure. So I remember back in 2000, I think it was 2019, 18 or 19, I think. Can't remember. 18. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I was actually doing a race up in Tahoe called the Castle Peak 100K. It's a 100K race, so 63 miles. Really, really tough course, known as one of the toughest 100Ks out there. And I was trained for it. Like, I was physically fit to do this race. And right around like mile 26, 27, there was a checkpoint where you had to be out by a certain time. And I had planned out when I thought I was going to be out of this checkpoint. I was about an hour behind schedule, which wasn't, on the grand scheme, wasn't a big deal. But to me, in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'm an hour behind. It's like, well, dude, you're going to be out for like 15 more hours. Does it really matter? But in my brain, it started getting in my head, I'm behind. And then next section out of that aid station happened to be the toughest part of the course. So we're climbing this really steep slope. It's probably like almost a 2-mile climb up to a place called Devil's Oven. That's the name of this next aid station. It's called Devil's Oven, which is it's in August in Tahoe. So you're at elevation, it's hot. Going to a place called Devil's Oven. I'm like, oh, this sounds great. And all on the way, that's where the voices start chirping at you. You should quit. This is too hard. Why are you out here? You don't need to do this race. You've already done 2 other races this year. Like, what else do you have to prove? Why put yourself through this? You could just go home. And the voices just got to me. And I remember getting up to the Devil's Oven aid station finally. And I looked at and by the way, the aid station in this case was a folding table with some like M&Ms and a couple bottles of water, because they had to hike it in like 8 miles to get to this aid station. And so I said to the aid station, I'm like, the first thing I said, what are my options? And she said, options for what? I said, I want to drop. She said, well, your options are you stay here until the race is over and you help us pack this stuff out, or you can go like 6 more miles to the next aid station and you can drop there. And I was like, well, option 1 sounds like it sucks. Option 2 sounds like it sucks. So I was like, but of the 2, I'm like, I'll take option 2. I'm like, okay, I'll just get to the next aid station. So I get my bearings. They said, just go down the trail a bit, it hangs to the left, and that'll get you to the next aid station. It's a little up and down, but it's not too bad. I was like, okay, I got it. So it turns out I missed the turn and I ended up down. I was supposed to go left and kind of stay above this ridge. I ended up down, and I was like running for a while, and I got all the way down to this valley, and I'm looking up at these ridges, and I'm like, I kind of feel like I should be up there for some reason. But I didn't. I kind of like kept going a couple more miles, and I got to this part of the trail where there's a cross section in the trail where the trail was on, was going straight, and there was like a T. And usually in these races, at any cross sections, they have them pretty well marked just to make sure you don't go off trail. And I remember going past this cross section, and I'm like, it's kind of odd. They should have that marked because, somebody like me is really tired and they could just totally not pay attention and go on the wrong trail. And then immediately I was like, oh, wait, it's not marked.
It's
Maybe I'm
me.
on the wrong trail. I'm on the wrong trail. And I was like, crap. So then I was like, all right, well, what are you supposed to do? Like, I could just keep going to nowhere, or I got to go back up 2 miles to where I came, back up to Devil's Oven. Now, this is after I'd already wanted to drop the race. I'm trying to drop the race and I can't even drop, right? I get to like halfway up and I remember thinking, shortcut. I think a shortcut to where I actually want to go. I turned left and I go about yards down the trail, and something in my brain said, stop. The rule is when you're lost, you always backtrack. You never try to find the shortcut, because that's where you get lost, and that's where you can put yourself in a position where you can get in really grave danger. And that was a situation like that right there. I was so proud of myself for remembering that in complete exhaustion. And that's a case where I could not have planned for that exact situation in the race, but it was this intuition by being through this enough times, learning the skills, doing enough reading, understanding where I should be and what I should be doing, that finally I was like, I stopped. I went back to the main trail. I started back up. I happened to run into a couple hikers and explained what I was trying to do. And they said, oh, well, if you go back down where you were coming from, there actually is a way to get to the next aid station that you want to get to. And I was like, are you sure? And the guy said, I used to do backcountry ski patrol back here. I know every tree. Trust me. So I ended up following this guy and his daughter all the way to this next aid station. 3.5 hours after I wanted to drop, I finally was able to drop on the race. And I walked into that aid station, and the guy looked at me because I was coming in from the wrong angle. He's like, are you a runner? And I looked at him. I said, not anymore. I took off my bib. He cut the bib so that it was officially out. And I said, now what? And he's like, well, what do you mean now what? I said, well, I'm dropping. He's like, okay. So do you have a ride? And I said, well, not yet. He said, well, the best thing you do is go another mile down the trail, because there's the highway intersects over there. So whoever it is going to pick you up. You should just go another mile. I'm like, you got to be kidding.
Of course.
But all of that, like going back to this, where we got on this thread, was you can't plan for every situation, and you're not going to win every situation. I didn't finish that race. But the thing that I learned, all of this started with my mindset. When I hit the aid station way back in mile 26, which was at this point like 5 or 6 hours ago, it all started there, because I let myself get in my own head, like, oh, I'm an hour behind. And everything after that completely unraveled. If instead I would have looked at that situation and said, hey, it's not that bad, even if I'm a little hour behind, even if I don't finish the finishing time that I want, it's no big deal, dude. Like, you're out here, you're doing a race. You don't have to finish the race in record time. You just got to finish the race. Just get to the next aid station. Relax. Yeah, you still got 40 miles to go in this race. Just chill. Get to Devil's Oven. Get some water, step by step. But I lost sight of that. That was one of the best lessons from the trail I've ever had. And that came from a complete disaster of a lot in the fact that I never even finished the race. So going back to this idea of like these situations, I want to close this deal. I want to hit my quota this quarter. I want to, get promoted from SDR to AE by the end of the year. Well, maybe you will, maybe you won't. But whatever happens, make sure you learn from these situations, adapt the skills, adapt the systems that you need in order to get to the place you want to go.
Love this story. And I think we got to give you a little more credit too, because we talk about like the cues. Like when you saw that branch in the road, the path, that cue kicked in. You're like, I need to change my action plan because this is wrong. Mm-hmm. And then we think about the mindset behind that too, of like,
yes,
how often do we
and that comes from experience.
Yeah. And so we think of like text messages and emails and like starting with the wrong mindset, or we're not thinking about it in the right way. Like you were saying, like, I need to get this deal closed by this quarter. Well, how does that change your filtering of that text message, that email, that LinkedIn DM or comment? And we think about how it all strings together. Yeah. It's like, I remember in investment banking, they always taught us getting to yes. And it was great, except for there was people involved and they had emotions. And then I read Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference. And it's those little things we pick up that we start to notice those cues like you did. And that can only come from experience and either learning
Mhm.
from other people at saying like, hey, I'm feeling a little off, and maybe I should slow my tempo down and recoup a little bit
Yep.
before I push it at the end. But in running, I can't say I love running, but as you do it enough, you start to notice different key things, just like selling.
Mhm.
You start
Yes.
to pick up those cues. You start to change your plan of action based on the feedback you're getting in your environment. But one thing you said that really stuck out, though, is depending on your mindset, that can throw everything off or it could point it right on course. And that all really starts with your headspace.
And what's interesting that Nick just brought up, and I'd love a little more on this, Scott, because I think this is really crucial
Yep.
in translating this lesson into sales, which is when we set sort of an expectation for ourselves, we create that mental filter. Oh, I'm an hour behind. Oh, I need to
Yeah.
close this deal by the end of the quarter. Oh, I need to. Here's the goal. I'm going to try and hit this as hard as possible. We start to filter all this information from prospects in the lens of that goal. And I've been there. I mean, this is the best part. Like we get to talk about all of our experiences, which is like, I've been there. I've gotten emails when I want to close, when I want to get this deal across the finish line, and that prospect sends back a little note. And I'm like, oh, they're being rude, or, oh, they're dragging their feet again. Oh God, here we
Right.
go. That it's That's not true, right? Technically speaking, that's not true. That's just a perception or a filter that I've imposed on myself. What could be happening is they need more information, and I could
Yes.
take the time. I could take the 30 minutes it takes to do the deeper dive for them, or hop on a call, and then suddenly the deal speeds up again. But here I sort of self-impose these own things on me. So
Yes.
for sellers or founders, Scott, like how can we sort of maintain these mental filters for ourselves, and like support ourselves to continue to interpret and run this marathon in a, I'm saying in a healthy, but maybe that's like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
wrong
Yeah.
word, so like a healthy
No,
way.
you're right. It is because look, like we said earlier in the conversation, there's going to be like there's all of these obstacles or obstructions that are going to pop up that you can't predict. And maybe it's getting a text message from your champion to say, "Oh, by the way, I'm taking another job as a VP at another company." Right? And so our brains, because we know we needed that deal by the end of the year or the end of the quarter, we're like, "Oh man, I can't believe she's doing this to me," kind of thing. Like we take it personally. Or,
Mm,
hey, listen, after that last meeting, Bob said he's just really not clear. Doesn't feel like you guys have enough, stability in the platform that we can trust that you guys can really come through for us. There's like all those different ways we can interpret that information. And so it's our job to be objective and say, okay, this happened, but it's not personal. It didn't happen to me. It's not like the woman that texted me said, like, oh, I can't wait to send this text to Scott to let him know that Bob's pissed, doesn't think we can come through. He can come through for us. She's like, we should be thankful they're sharing that information. And so
mm,
the other thing you said was like, well, maybe later on the deal can speed up. So for me in that race, like I interpreted the one bit of data, which was I'm 1 hour behind, as like almost catastrophic.
mm,
Like I interpreted that as like, oh no, I'm behind. What I should have done now looking back, I should have said, okay, I'm an hour behind. First of all, no big deal. Doesn't matter if I finish an hour behind what I wanted to finish at. Number two, I'm freaking out here in the mountains on a Saturday and I get to do this. So let's just be grateful about the fact that I get to do this, both for my time and also physically, I'm capable of doing this. Number three, physically, I'm not injured. I'm not hurt. I've got plenty of water, plenty of hydration. Like my body's physically fine. There's no issues here. And fourthly, maybe in my race plan later on in the race, maybe I added some buffer time that I can catch up a little bit. And I know I've done this in races where I'm like, I think I'm an hour behind at one point in the race, but later on in the race, I realized, oh, this one section was a little bit easier than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to take me 2.5 hours to do this section. It only took me 2 hours and 10 minutes. I just got 20 minutes back. So you have to like adapt all of this stuff. So it's having that emotional maturity to say, okay, this isn't happening. It's not personal. It's not happening to me. It's just happening. So you got to take sort of a little bit of a stoic perspective. Okay, well, what can I do with this information? And maybe it's like, okay, I get this call from or this text from Michelle that she's leaving to go take another VP job. Okay, cool. Well, first thing I should do is say, that's awesome, Michelle. I'm really happy for you. Secondly is, hey, when you have a couple minutes, you think we might be able to grab a call so we can talk through how I should handle the deal from here, as opposed to like, oh my God, doom and
Mhm.
gloom. And then our mindset is broken. So
Mhm.
that's the sort of lesson from there, as you're talking through that, Morgan, for me.
I love that. And I think we'll tie this in really quick because I don't want to lose this little teaser you dropped earlier, which is the deal has been won. You're not a big fan of that. Can we talk about that for a second? Because I feel these sort of
Yeah.
probably relate to each other.
So, I mean, there's just, for who knows how long, salespeople said, oh, like we closed the sale. We're trying to close the deal. Close. Like finally the contract gets signed. It's like, oh yeah, we closed the deal. Right. And then we pop champagne, either for real or metaphorically, high five each other. Great job. We closed the deal. And it's like, in my mind, I'm like, well, what's happening from the buyer standpoint when they sign that contract and send the money for the invoice? Are they going, I'm so happy that those guys closed the deal? They don't celebrate and high five. They're like, what do they say actually when they call you and they say, we're ready to move forward? Let's get started. We'd like to work with you. We're looking forward to you guys helping us out. So what the
Yes.
perspective too often is like, oh, we won the deal or we closed the deal. From a sales standpoint, we look at that as like, oh, this is the finish line. I just got to get to the finish line and close the deal and win the deal. It's not the finish line. You spent months or even years to get to the starting line of the relationship. So however long and frustrating a sales cycle might have been, 6 months, 9 months, 18 months to get that 150K deal, you did all of that work just to get to the starting line of the relationship with that customer who you assumably you hope you're going to have that customer 5, 10 years or longer. So it's not about closing the deal. It's about starting the relationship. And I think that's another mistake a lot of salespeople make is they're looking so focused, got to close the deal. They actually forget to think about the future. And one of the things we teach in our coaching program is how you can actually use the post-sale plan of action. We call it a customer success strategy. You can actually use that as part of your sale.
Brilliant.
So if you have a situation where maybe there's a little trepidation or some hesitation from the customer, you've covered all the bases, you've done discovery, you've talked to the decision makers, they have budget, but they're still not ready to move forward. One of the things you can do is say, listen, when we work with people like you, we know sometimes there's some hesitation about moving forward because it can feel a little bit scary to all of a sudden start working. You have to switch from old system to new system, or you have to start implementing the new system that's taking over manual process or spreadsheets. We totally get that. So why don't we take a couple minutes now and let's talk about what happens after, if you were to sign the contract today, if you were to say to us, hey, let's get started. Let me talk to you about all the ways that we're going to help you out in order to get you the results that we're promising to you. So, hey, here's what would happen we call it the 7x1. It's the 7 firsts. So, hey, in the first minute, if you were to call me and say, let's get started, the very first thing I'm going to do in that first minute, I'm going to text our CTO and tell them, we got to set up a VPN instance for this new customer. That's the first. The second first is the first hour. So at the end of the first hour, the next thing we're going to do is make sure that we have all the documents signed, and we're going to ask for a list of the people you want us to get set up in our system. And at the end of that's the second first, third first, end of the first day. By the end of the first day, our team is going to have the VPN instance lined up. We're going to have the logins ready to go. And I'm going to contact the person on the project manager on your side in order to set up a training session in the next 3 days. Then in the first week, where we'll have everybody logged in, everybody trained, and we're going to make sure that everybody's at least using the platform at least once, or twice throughout the course of their day, so they can get used to that as part of the workflow. That's the fourth one. Then the first month, you're going to start seeing results. The data is going to flow in the dashboard. I'm going to show you how to use the dashboard to make decisions. Into the first quarter, we're going to be fully up and running. You're going to have these results starting to see materially happening for you. And by the end of the first year, then you're going to be so excited about the product roadmap we're building and these other new products that you're going to be excited to want to keep moving with us, buy new stuff, expand the relationship from here. So if you explain that to people and give concrete examples of exactly what's going to happen, then that reduces the perception of risk in their mind and helps them feel a lot more confident about moving forward. And best of all, it's going to help them feel confident enough to actually pay the price that you deserve to charge. Because it's not just about getting the contract signed. It's like, no, these people are true partners. They're already thinking about what happens after we get started.
And you think about referrals and how referrals, nobody says, hey, I think Scott can do this. It's like, this is what Scott did for me, right? Like, this is
Yep.
how it happened. So it's, you've delivered on a promise, and now they know you can do the work you say you can. So
Mhm.
why would you walk away when you've just initiated that relationship saying, we can do this, because now they trust you? I feel like it's
Yep.
such a missed part in sales, because it's like that leapfrog effect. Because if you do a POC for your, and a POC could be really good for the enterprise, because now they trust you, now they know how to gauge success, and you're like, okay, now let's hit the ground running. And that is one of the most brilliant
Mm.
ways of looking at implementation. Morgan, you can have.
I know. I was about to say, maybe we need to talk about our 7x1 over
It's your
here.
7x1. And it's something we actually use that as a challenge to our startup founders. And we'll say, look,
Mm.
before you even try to roll this out to a prospective customer, like what if in your next team meeting, you're all hands with your engineers, your product people, everyone else around you. Let's just do this as an exercise and say, hey team, we've got these 3 deals in the pipeline. We're trying to get them converted by the end of the year so that they can start with us by, January. I'm just curious from everybody's perspective, if this company were to give me a call today, send me a text, say, let's move forward. Does everybody know what we'd actually do first? Like the very first thing, aside from, backflips, because we have a big customer on board. Like what is, from your perspective, is the whole team clear on what we need to do in that first hour, the first day, the first week? Let's talk through that, because chances are they don't, or chances are the engineering team may not even know that this deal is actually really close and that you might have to get a VPN set up. And do they have the structures in place that they can quickly get a VPN instance spun up for a new customer? Do they have that relationship with, say, Amazon Web Services, that they can do that in a minute's time? If not, probably something you want to get in motion. Like, do we
That's
know how to set up accounts in our own system? Like I remember when I was at Blend selling lending software to banks. One of our first biggest customers was a company called NationStar, and we went live in this pilot program with 10 of their calling reps. They were using our workflow software, and I remember the very first day, we ended up having 25 bugs that we fixed that day with the implementation.
wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
like we went live at 7:00 in the morning in this call center. First bug, 7:00. Second bug,
Wow.
7:01. Like, and I'm on site with one of our engineers, and it was like literally all day. I'm taking pictures with my iPhone of the screen, putting it into Evernote file, sending it to Devin. Devin is just like coding and pushing code all day. End of the first day,
Wow.
the VP, and we're down in Texas, the VP guy named Jason, like kind of goatee. He's like a Texas guy, right? Good dude, but just like kind of a little intimidating, especially from, I'm like West Coast California dude. I'm like out of my element. And he's like, man, I need to talk to you. And I come in, I go to the office, and he's like, heard we had some problems. I said, yeah, we had a few. And he said, I can't tell you how impressed I am. And I was like, huh? He said, do you know how long it takes for our other vendors to fix a problem when we report it? And I said, no. He said, it usually takes them 3 months just to acknowledge that we submitted a bug report. Like, you guys fixed and found something like 20 bugs today. He's like, we never even heard of that. We didn't even know that was possible. Now, that can't happen every day. Like, let's make
Right.
sure that doesn't happen again. But like, you actually bought yourself some time. And then I was like, okay, cool. And then he said, by the way, I want to get access to the dashboard so that when at the end of all the data that's going into the workflow, I want to be able to sort of see it in a report. So just let me know how I access the dashboard. I'm like, oh yeah, no problem. I'll ask Justin, our engineer, he can get you access. So I leave the meeting, wipe sweat from brow. And I called Justin. I'm like, hey, Justin, here's the deal. I need to get access for Jason to get into the dashboard. And Justin's response was, what dashboard? I was like, the dashboard. He's like, there is no dashboard. I'm like, but didn't we demo a dashboard? He's like, well, it's on the roadmap, but we don't have a dashboard yet. I was like, well, that's kind of a problem because Jason's expecting to see all this data and report by tomorrow morning. And he's like, well, we have all the data. I can export it into a CSV file and send it over to you. So Justin exports the CSV, loads it up. I pull it down, pull it into Excel. I spend like 3 hours that night in my hotel room collating all this data into an elegant like Excel report The next morning, I email it to Jason and I go to his office. I'm like, hey man, I just emailed you this Excel report. I figured you didn't want to deal with like logging into a dashboard and all that mess. And you would probably just want to see it in Excel anyway. So I just put it into an Excel spreadsheet for you. Is that cool? And he pulls it up. He's like, oh, that's perfect. This is exactly what I need. He's like, cool. So if you just get this updated for me every day, that'd be really good. I'm like, yeah, no problem. So for like the next 6 weeks, every day we had to export the CSV file into a spreadsheet that had to be updated for Jason. He's thinking this is the dashboard. And we had, yeah, Nick is like losing it right now. You guys, it's so funny. But this is exactly why you have to talk about the 7x1. Because like, okay, if internally, it's like, okay, if when we go live with this pilot that we've been talking about for 3 months, like these are the things that are going to happen. And personally, it's also my fault, right? I was so focused on the workflow being worked correctly, making sure all of the 10 reps had their logins, that they were trained. I had done the training 2 days before myself on site, all of this stuff. We had forgotten about the fact, like, who else is going to be actually using the data? Oh, Jason's going to need to see the data, right? Because Jason's going to use it for Rick in a meeting for Rick with Rick, who's the senior vice president, right? So we didn't think through that. Fortunately, we patched it up with spit and bubblegum and it all worked out, but that could have been a real disaster for us, right?
It's interesting you bring this up, and Nick and I are both losing our minds over this. First, it's an amazing story, and I love that this is sort of a great like case study.
By the way, Blend is now public. Is it IPO'd last summer, which is hilarious because I'm like the CEO Nemo's up on the NY Stock Exchange, like ringing the bell. And like, dude, I remember hanging out with Nemo in a cubicle at Nation Star in Dallas, Texas, like working on these spreadsheets together. And now he's up ringing the bell. Like it's possible 10 years later.
That's
anyway,
so
sorry.
Cool. The thing that doesn't escape me in this, and I feel like I see this more often in sellers who come from more like siloed sales arrangements, which is very common in like SaaS or low dollar SaaS, or like what companies that are now becoming product like growth companies, basically, that the seller had never interacted with success before, or the seller was thinking about, as you said, closing the deal but not implementing the deal. And so their job in a previous life is, I'm getting this into my column in the CRM, and that's all that I have to think about, because there's other teams that have handled the success side. But as you move into more complex deals, like that's not how it works, because, and especially transformational deals, and like obviously digital transformation is a part of that, but any sort of transformational complex deal that you're selling, we're bringing together 3 different divisions or whatever else, like it's almost malpractice for the seller not to think about, how does this implementation happen from our product teams or our success teams? What are the 7x1s? And have that before even that deal gets really across the finish line.
It's like we talked about way in the beginning of our conversation about taking ownership. It's like, oh, well, I did my job. Like I got the deal converted and signed, and CS screwed it up, or product didn't release the product like they said they were going to promise, or engineering isn't adding the new features that they said we were going to add. It's like, okay, we can like whine and complain about it, or we can just accept that the reality is we're selling a complex product. The engineering team is probably working their butts off. Product team is probably working their butt off. Marketing teams, everybody's working their butt off. It doesn't mean that what they're doing is working necessarily for you in this deal. So you can't just look at, going back to that sales quality, sales hierarchy of needs. Like you can't just look at this situation as, okay, this situation, we're going to get this deal across and then worry about CS later, or worry about the product, feature rollout next. It's like, no, I got to go up a level or 2, take a systems approach and say, okay, we're getting pretty close on this deal, or it's moving from early stage to late stage. We've got decision makers. We know there's budget. We know there's need, there's urgency, all that stuff. What I should probably do at this point is pull together the key people on our team, maybe do a pipeline review with them involved. And it doesn't have to be every day, every week. You got to be respectful of their time as well. But it's like, hey, like once a month, I'm going to buy lunch for the whole group, out of my own pocket if I have to, bring in some pizzas and say, look, these are the top 5 deals I'm working. This is where I am with these deals. So if these deals go live, are you able to support everything I've been selling or not? Or are there any places you might be able to help me out? Because it seems like we're getting a little stalled. Like the CTO is asking about certain integrations, or, platform stability. Well, maybe the engineer guy can go like, oh, dude, like I could totally explain that. How about I just hop on your next call with you on the CTO so that you don't have to do it on your own? It's like, oh, okay. Like that would be really helpful. And so you got to take ownership and leadership of this, because it's going to come down to you. At the end of the day, if the sale doesn't happen, guess who you get the credit with, like, great job, closing the deal. Good job. Here's your commission check. But if you don't get it, be like, what happened? So my first sales job out of college, my first real sales job, I was selling college textbooks for Prentice Hall, which is now Pearson Education. And I had a kick-ass manager. And I was out there working campuses in my territory, like university campuses, talking to professors. And some of these textbooks deals are like 1,000 textbooks. They're like 50, 60, 100K deals at some of these universities. And the first thing he told me is like, if you see there's an opening, like a sale opening up, don't go down alone. Don't be the hero. If the ship goes down, bring everybody with you. Because if you try to go hero mode and try to get this 50K deal all by yourself, and people find out you lost to a competitor, and because the additions last for 3 years, we are locked out of that sale for the next 3 years at least, then the marketing team in the home office, the product team, the tech team, the regional manager, everyone's going to wonder, like, dude, why didn't you call me? I could have come down and done a presentation. We even had situations where the authors themselves would travel to a campus if it was a big enough sale. If we had enough sales in the pipeline of that book's author, they would actually come to and do like a one-day trip. We go to 2 or 3 campuses and they do a presentation. All of that's possible. But you got to let us know what the heck's going on in your territory, because there's like 350 reps in the country. If you don't communicate with us, we can't help you. But if you do, you're going to be first in line for a road trip.
I feel like we could just sit here for hours and
I would
tell
love to,
stories
man.
and learn from your experience. This is amazing. Somehow we're already at the end of this hour. It has flown by. I've learned, first of all, there's just some amazing wisdom nuggets you dropped today. And I loved
Thanks,
all the
guys.
stories that you shared from the trail. There's such amazing analogies from your experience running and competing in triathlons to how enterprise sales need to happen. So thanks so much for joining today. And
Sure.
where can people find you, Scott?
Well, I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn, of course. I'm the only Scott Sambucci that I know of on LinkedIn. One of the things aside from obviously you can shoot me a note and connect with me on LinkedIn, just let me know that you are connecting because you learned about me through this conversation, because I get lots and lots and lots of inbound connection requests from people, especially ones that aren't personalized. And I'm like, I don't know who you are. I'm not going to accept that connection request. So don't do that. Listen to Morgan and Nick if you're listening. Do what they say when it comes to LinkedIn. But aside from that, what I would encourage anybody that's listening, if you go to sales, the word sales, and then Qualia, Qualia, sales, Qualia, Qualia.com/book. If you go to salesqualia.com/book, you can actually download a full, complete PDF version of this book called Stop Hustling, Start Scaling. Whether you're a salesperson or you're a startup founder, the subtitle is probably more important than the main title of the book. The subtitle is Ramp Up Your B2B Startups Repeatable Revenue with the Q Framework. So this book, Stop Hustling, Start Scaling, walks you through what I call the Q Framework, which is 7 questions. The Q stands for questions. 7 questions you can ask to interrogate and build your sales process. And so if you just download a copy of that book, also add your email list, I'll let you know about webinars and trainings and all the other stuff that we're doing. The book was the #1 bestseller on Amazon when it first came out. And I don't care about the royalties as much as I care about getting it in the hands of as many people as possible. So salesqualia.com/book, download a free copy, and hit me up on LinkedIn. Let me know that you heard about me through the show.
Thank you so much. And this is a good reminder, everyone. We aren't the running back. We are the quarterback. Sales is a team sport. Make sure you're using your whole team, and then dial in that mindset. Thank you, Scott, so much for this. Really appreciate your time.
That was a hoot,
We're
guys.
definitely going to have to do this again soon.
Indeed. We'll see everyone next time.